Hello, I'd like to welcome all participants to today's webinar entitled, Can Hydrogen Help the World Accelerate Net Zero Targets? My name is Matthew Hengesbaugh, Policy Researcher for IGES Japan, and I am pleased to chair this opening session. We have a very interesting program ahead of us, comprised of two parts. The first, focusing on the implications of hydrogen development in Asia, and the second examining the global reach of hydrogen technology beyond Asia at the global level. As such, this webinar provides an important opportunity to identify potential areas of international cooperation, including around the development of strategies to produce renewable hydrogen at scale. We will discuss how hydrogen can contribute to net zero, as well as look at broader themes, including good practices and lessons for future work. It's quite a dense agenda, so I'd like to remind all panelists that they have 10 minutes in total for their presentations. The first session will last a total of 45 minutes. This will be followed by the second session lasting 50 minutes, including Q&A discussion. With those housekeeping announcements, please allow me to turn the floor over to Mr. Tsuyoshi Kawakami, Acting Managing Director of IGES Japan, to deliver opening remarks. Over to you, Kawakami-san.
Thank you. Can hydrogen help the world accelerate net zero targets? Organized by the Institute for Global Environmental Strategies. IGES has been conducting research on various dimensions pertaining to the theme of net zero emissions. As we expand our research in areas that have critical bearing to the climate mitigation and low carbon development, our colleagues have been actively working on the role of hydrogen and the future energy mix. Hydrogen deserves special importance in the global energy mix. It can be a key enabler to global transition to a sustainable energy future and zero carbon. If humanity can successfully produce, store, and use hydrogen at lower cost using cleaner technologies, it can turn out to be a remarkable solution for today's overdependence on the carbon-intensive energy mix. Delegates, today, a significant share of global hydrogen production is based on fossil fuels, gray hydrogen. To decarbonize hydrogen production, there is a need to shift away from gray to green, that is, hydrogen produced by renewable electricity. As many of you are aware, Japan has been actively conducting research, developing feasible technologies, and promoting the use of green hydrogen through various policy measures. Japan's Fukushima hydrogen energy research field sets a notable example in this regard. Delegates, today, the webinar has two thematic sessions focusing on Asia and the global arena. After my colleague, Dr. Nandakumar, makes a framing presentation, Mr. Mori will chair the next session, in which Mr. Yoshida of METI and Dr. Sriyadi, ASEAN Energy Center, will give presentations about key developments in Asia. My colleague, Dr. Tamula, and Mr. Sethi of TERI will then join as discussant. In the next session, chaired by Dr. Zasman, we have Professor Silvio from University of Bahia, Ms. Kai from ISA, Ambassador Jeff from UK, and my colleague, Dr. Moinitin. We then move on to question and answer before the concluding remarks by Mr. Inoue from Ministry of Environment, Japan. Once again, on behalf of the Institute for Global Environmental Strategies, I welcome you all to the webinar.
Thank you so much, Kawakami-san. May I now invite our next speaker, Dr. Nandakumar Jananhanan, Research Manager, Climate and Energy Team, IGES, for his keynote presentation. Please take it away, Nandu-san.
Thank you so much, Matthew, and thank you so much, all the participants and audience who managed to find time to attend our event. It's a great pleasure to have you all here. My presentation is focusing on the topic of can Asia lead green hydrogen production? It's going to be a very quick one. I'll try to conclude in maybe next 7 to 8 minutes. So in this presentation, I'm trying to address 3 main aspects: technology, policy, and politics pertaining to green hydrogen production. Once again, I want to thank the Strategic Research Fund of IGES for supporting our research. As you all know, hydrogen is definitely gaining importance in discussions in academia, in industry, everywhere. But, and we also are very familiar with the kind of production processes, transformations required, and transportation needs, as well as end users in industry, transport, other purposes. At the same time, there are multiple challenges that green hydrogen face today. The most important challenge that deserves a lot of attention is the cost of hydrogen. As we all know, the cost remains extremely high in the current time, especially because it has to compete with other energy sources. And in terms of infrastructure, that also is sort of an area that needs a lot of policy attention. Green hydrogen development demand a lot of new infrastructure in terms of production, in terms of storage, transportation, filling stations, etc. So until and unless these infrastructure are developed, there will be a difficulty that the sector will actually continue to face some difficulties. And another major concern about green hydrogen is that energy loss happens at every stage of its process. In terms of electrolysis, there is a loss of energy, something like about 30 to 35%. In terms of liquefying or converting, there's again another 10 to 25% of loss. In terms of transportation, that also witness some energy loss. And the same thing goes for usage of hydrogen in fuel cells. So this is one of the key areas that needs attention, not only from the policymakers, but also from the scientific community and experts who deal with technology. Again, for the next point is that green hydrogen does not have any sort of specific value recognition as of today, because there is no green hydrogen specific market, and that needs to be there. Once that comes into limelight, we will know that there is a definite demand or definite recognition of green hydrogen over other forms of hydrogen processes, hydrogen production processes. And we also have another aspects is that we need to ensure the sustainability of this entire production processes. Today, hydrogen, when we talk about hydrogen, it is all about how we produce hydrogen is somewhat taking the back seat, but that needs to come into the forefront. So there is a need for shifting away from grid electricity. With this introduction, I'll go to the 3 main aspects which I wanted to discuss here, which is technology, policy, and politics. In terms of technology, basically, it is all about technology readiness of electrolysis processes. As we all know, electrolysis processes will be, or it is, the main method that is used in the green hydrogen production process. And we have several technologies existing now. But in terms of market uptake, and sort of maturity of technologies, there is some sort of disparity. For example, SOEC, which is a solid oxide electrolyzer cell technology, is apparently more efficient. It is highly efficient, and it also is resilient towards impurities. But it is yet to actually mature in the market. So we probably need to have more research and attention in this direction. The next point is the importance of policy. There is a need for conducive policy measures that are critical in promoting green hydrogen development, its storage and usage in various applications. And if we specifically look at policy measures are required to promote research, promote production or industry, and also required to ensure that to strengthen collaboration between industries as well as between countries. And the next point is that institutions have to be built or it has to be strengthened, because green hydrogen development is since it is going to be a specific industry, infrastructure or regulations on or institutions that actually are going to look after technology transfer, etc., need to be strengthened. Similarly, finance. Greater attention is needed to support this industry through adequate finance, and PPP, public-private partnership, will be critical in this direction. The last point I want to mention here is the importance of politics. As energy sector is usually depend on international trade, we need to understand that there is a greater importance of geopolitics, international trade, and market trends. All of these are going to influence green hydrogen production. If countries are going to depend on international trade for supplies, then definitely one has to actually think of overseas dependency, trade agreements, as well as its competition with conventional energy market. Similarly, price fluctuations. To what extent price fluctuations can impact energy bill of a country, or the price vulnerability can actually affect the industry. These are all critical points that need to be considered. And the last point here is about the importance of geopolitics. I don't need to give a special introduction about how geopolitics can affect the energy industry, especially in terms of transportation routes or the security of sea lanes of communications, or new strategic choke points, or security of infrastructure. So all these elements are they are all deserve extremely important importance. And with this, I would like to conclude my presentation. And once again, I want to thank my colleagues who are part of this research, and thank IGE's Strategic Research Fund for supporting our research. Thank you so much. And back to Matthew.
Wonderful. Thank you, Nandu-san, both for sharing these important insights, as well as setting the stage for subsequent discussions today. Moving right along, I will now hand the virtual microphone to Mr. Hideki Yukimori, Special Policy Advisor, IGES Japan, who will chair our first session entitled Hydrogen Development and Net Zero Context, Asian Experiences. Mori-san, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Matthew, for your kind introduction. I will moderate this session, focusing on the role of hydrogen in the Asian energy mix. Before inviting speakers and discussants to make presentations, let me highlight 3 specific points that present the importance of hydrogen in the region. First, Asia is at the epicenter of global energy demand growth, being home to about 1.5 billion people. The region has also been one of the biggest consumers of fossil fuels. This sets the right background for discussion to focus on the importance of clean hydrogen development within the region. Secondly, there are multiple challenges and opportunities in the region's pathway toward net zero targets. These include over-reliance on fossil fuels, disparity in access to clean technology, and the region's vulnerability to climate change impact. This focuses on the point that quick promotion of decarbonization and clean energy transition is critically important for the region. Third, we need to understand the importance of shades of hydrogen and think about how we could mainstream the production of green hydrogen, without which decarbonization targets of the region may face big challenges. Now, let me invite 2 speakers and 2 discussants to present important pieces of the big picture on hydrogen's role in Asia's energy mix and the climate mitigation target. So first, let me invite our first speaker, Mr. Hiroki Yoshida, Deputy Director, Hydrogen Fuel Cell Strategy Office, Agency of Natural Resources and Energy, Ministry of the Economy, Trade and Industry of Japan. He is going to talk about Japan's vision and action toward the hydrogen economy. So, Mr. Yoshida-san, please.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Hiroki Yoshida from Hydrogen Fuel Cell Strategy Office of METI. I'm going to make a presentation on Japan's visions and action toward hydrogen economy. Next slide, please. Yeah, thank you. Japan is the first country to formulate a national hydrogen strategy in 2017. Prime Minister set 2050 carbon neutral declaration, and Japan positioned hydrogen as one of the priority areas in the growing growth strategy in 2020. In addition, Japan is trying to expand the amount of hydrogen introduction and reduce hydrogen costs through the Green Innovation Fund projects, other government budget projects, and private sector self-fund projects. As for volume, our target is shown bottom of this slide, focusing on volume and target and cost. As for regarding volume, current approximately 2 million ton hydrogen, targeted to 3 million ton by 2030, 20 million ton by 2050. Regarding cost, currently 100 Japanese yen per normal cubic meter, targeted to 30 Japanese yen per normal cubic meter by 2030, 20 Japanese yen per normal cubic meter by 2050. Next slide, please. Japan's strategic energy plan revised in 2021 shows updated power generation mix target toward 2030. It requires to improvement of more energy efficiency and renewable energy deployment. In addition, it allocate 1% for hydrogen and ammonia in 2030 power generation mix. Next slide, please. This slide shows rough roadmap for supply side and demand side of hydrogen. We are now developing international hydrogen supply chain and new domestic supply sources. So far, these are demonstration phases, but we are trying to make them as commercial basis by 2030 and upscaling and diversification until 2050. Transportation sector continue to roll over leading hydrogen demand. We are now seeking to promote introduction of fuel cell trucks. We expected power generation sector will make large-scale demand, and it will contribute to hydrogen supply chain development, same to energy. Hydrogen also has the potential to decarbonize steel and chemical production process and heat demand. Next slide, please. We are now developing international hydrogen supply chain project. Methyl-cyclohexane MCH the hydrogen carrier in demonstration project was completed in June 2020 between Brunei and Japan. Liquefied hydrogen carrier completed the world first maritime transport authorized to Japan in February 2022, including liquefied hydrogen and loading and unloading, followed by the large-scale demonstration project aimed at commercialization by 2029. Next slide, please. We are also conducting large-scale electrolyzer demonstration project in Fukushima and Yamanashi, alkaline electrolyzer plant in Fukushima, PEM electrolyzer plant in Yamanashi. Currently, larger demonstration projects are underway to further increase size, improve operation, and reduce cost. Next slide, please. This slide shows hydrogen use in transportation sector. Currently, approximately 7,400 fuel cell vehicles and 126 hydrogen refueling station HRS are deployed. Fukushima Prefecture and Toyota are preparing to start fuel cell truck demonstration project, including refueling timing management. We are also starting to develop high-speed refueling protocol for heavy-duty vehicles. In addition, East Japan Railway Company, JR East, has started fuel cell train demonstration at their commercial line. Next slide, please. Technology development and demonstration will be carried out in the field of large-scale thermal power generation and cogeneration 1 megawatt class for supply heat and electricity. Japan will contribute to world effort to commercialize hydrogen power generation. Hydrogen boiler has already had deployed in some cases. Hydrogen is expected to use as a heat source at the high temperature required in industry process. Projects using hydrogen as a heat sources are underway in diverse fields, including auto parts manufacturing, tire manufacturing, and coffee roasting. Next slide, please. In order to create hydrogen implementation models, we are encouraged region private companies and relevant bodies which are potential of hydrogen activity to start discussion, feasibility study, and R&Ds, and also demonstration project. A kind of regional model and or hydrogen cluster are called hydrogen hub, hydrogen valley in some hydrogen activity areas. This is a snapshot of Fukushima. Fukushima Prefecture, located in north part of Japan, is one of active prefecture for hydrogen. They have a Fukushima Hydrogen Industry Academia Government Collaboration Committee in order to share progress of a hydrogen project and to discuss how to develop local industry with hydrogen. As you know, NED is handling the demonstration project for large-scale electrolysis with renewable energy at Fukushima Hydrogen Energy Research Field, FA2R. Fukushima Prefecture and Namiya Town are using hydrogen and fuel cell for their public facilities. This hydrogen comes from FA2R. Sumitomo Rubber Industries, tire manufacturer, has started to demonstration project for deployment of hydrogen boilers at their factory line. Denso, a car parts manufacturer, has started demonstration project for using electric heaters and hydrogen boilers in their production line. Iwatani and Soma Gas Group, their gas provider, have started a feasibility study for blending hydrogen into the gas services. Next slide, please. This is a snapshot of Yamanashi. Yamanashi Prefecture, located in center of Japan, is another active prefecture for hydrogen. They have Yamanashi Hydrogen and Fuel Cell related industry development committee in order to share progress of hydrogen project and to discuss how to develop local industry with hydrogen. Yamanashi Prefecture has developed a renewable power plant and hydrogen technology many years. Yamanashi Prefecture started to develop a 60 megawatt class integrated electrolysis system and hydrogen boiler in cooperation with Toray, Hitachi Zosen, GMS Energy, Kaji Technology, and Miura. UCC Ueshima Coffee has started demonstration project for hydrogen heat use at their factory line in cooperation with Yamanashi Prefecture, TEPCO, Energy Partner, Toray, and Tomoe for roasting their coffee product. Yamanashi Prefecture is not only doing R&D and demonstration project, but they also established Yamanashi Hydrogen Company, YHC, with Toray and TEPCO Energy Partners to provide power to gas services as output and or outcome of their projects. In addition, Yamanashi University is doing hydrogen-related R&Ds such as electrode catalyst for high performance cost reduction and associate hydrogen supply and utilization technology, HISAT, provide human resource development services for hydrogen refueling station. Next slide, please. METI established a new subcommittee for hydrogen policy in March. subcommittee examine way to expand the introduction of commercialization of hydrogen and ammonia, focusing on price differences with existing fuel and the state of infrastructure development. Prime Minister Kishida stated in his speech that he would be bold support measures regarding hydrogen policy. Next slide, please. Japan launched the Hydrogen Ministerial Meeting, HMM, in 2018. We believe it is one of the ideal high-level meeting for sharing knowledge and direction for establishing and reaching the hydrogen economy. Japan held the 5th Hydrogen Energy Ministerial Meeting in cooperation with IEA as part of Tokyo GX Week on September 26, 2022. As a result of the meeting, the chair released the chair's summary for accelerating and enlargement of the Tokyo Statement and Global Action Agenda, including additional goal of amount of renewable and low carbon hydrogen to be produced by 2030 of at least 90 million ton hydrogen. Thank you very much. That's it, my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you for sharing with us. Very ambitious hydrogen policy of Japan and its strong commitment. Thank you very much. Now we move on to the second presentation. Second presentation will be made by Dr. Benny Suryadi, Manager, ASEAN Center for Energy, Indonesia. He's going to talk about hydrogen in ASEAN, economic prospects, development, and application.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, Mr. Hideyuki Mori, Special Policy Advisor from IES Japan. Good afternoon, everyone. Warm greeting to everyone who are joining the discussion this afternoon. And first of all, I'd like to thank Institute for the Global Environment Strategy, particularly to Dr. Nanda Kumar for inviting me to participate in this important discussion. And part of the topic of our event today, can hydrogen help the world accelerate to net zero targets? I would like to share a brief perspective from the Southeast Asia region on how we see hydrogen, its economic prospect, development, and application. Short introduction about the institution that I'm representing for, the ASEAN Center for Energy is an intergovernmental organization that represents the interests of the 10 countries in this region on the energy cooperation. We support the ASEAN member states through strong collaboration and partnership with the Ministry of Energy from all of the 10 ASEAN member states, and also with the dialogue partners, including with Japan and METI for the activities in this region. And despite the variation in the level of economic development or geographical situation, among other things, the 10 countries in this region share the same aspirational goals to achieve the energy security, accessibility, affordability, and sustainability for all. Our common vision in this region is guided by a regional blueprint of the energy cooperation, that what we call the ASEAN Plan of Action for the Energy Cooperation. The current version for the period of 2021 to 2025 is set under the sub-theme accelerating the energy transition and strengthening energy resilience through greater innovation and cooperation. And this blueprint covers 7 program area or 7 sectors, as you can see in the screen, among others, the ASEAN Power Grids, which aims to expand the regional multilateral electricity trading, strengthening grid resilience and modernization, and promote clean and renewable energy integration, or to achieve an aspirational target for increasing the component of renewable energy to 23% by 2025. Recently, we launched our flagship report, the 7 ASEAN Energy Outlooks, which was presented to the ASEAN Minister on Energy meeting last September. This report is also received generous support from METI. So on behalf of ASEAN, I would like to also convey our highest appreciation for the METI in the support in this report. Based on this report, in line with the rapid economic growth, energy demand in the ASEAN region expected to triple by 2050 under the baseline scenario, while the total primary energy supply will grow by a factor of about 3.7. Natural gas, oil, and coal dominate the region energy supply, accounting for 88% of the energy mix. The number might differ between the scenario, but we continue to see the high reliance of the region to the fossil fuels. And under the existing policy that we have today, we may have a difficulty to fulfill the aspirational regional target of 23% of renewable energy by 2025. So a lot of concern on the energy security is also rising from the scenario that we projected. Hence, it's very crucial for us in the region to explore alternative options to fulfill our energy demand from the various sources, including hydrogen. So why hydrogen? I think it's a common reason, a background with what is also being presented in the context of Japan before. Even though it's not only hydrogen for us, as similar to Japan, similar to the other countries around the world, ASEAN is exploring various options. But we see the hydrogen as an alternative for the region in our energy transition, particularly also know as most country in this region also pursuing the aspiration toward the carbon neutrality or net zero. We do see that we have some kind of resource to develop the hydrogen. We have a relevant infrastructure, the existing that can be further utilized. And we understand the number of the sectoral would be difficult to decarbonize might rely on the option of the hydrogen. So in this context, the ASEAN Center for Energy conducting studies on the economic prospect, development, and application of the hydrogen in ASEAN. So, so we divided into 3 areas. First, on the hydrogen for the power sectors. Our studies considered hydrogen as a form of the energy storage for renewable and subsequently converted hydrogen back into the electricity after a certain period of storage. There are 2 types of scenario. One considered for production and storage of hydrogen, and the electricity is generated using either fuel cell or gas turbine and injected to the power grid with the transmission distance as specified in many scenarios that we have for each country. The other consider hydrogen production facility located near to renewable energy source. The hydrogen is subsequently transported to generator near the electricity demand center and converted back into the electricity when needed during the peak load period of the power grids. So study is being conducted in each particular and every particular countries in the ASEAN. But then from our calculation, it can be concluded that for the power sector application, substantial decrease in the capital cost of the fuel cell, as well as significant decrease in the cost of the hydrogen production are precondition for green hydrogen to become a competitive option as the energy storage for renewable energy in this region. Next, on the transport sector, On the transport, hydrogen is applied to fuel three type difference of the fleet in our studies, namely passenger cars, buses, and truck, which in each of these fleets, vehicle of typical alternative powertrain are being compared as well, like BEV, plug-in hybrid vehicle, and ICV, beside the fuel cell electric vehicles. Our studies also focus on the 4 keys index of the performance of the vehicles, such as total cost of ownership, fuel cost per kilometers, fuel per energy consumption per kilometers, and also carbon emission per kilometers. From this analysis, the cost of ownership of the hydrogen fuel cell engine for bus and truck from any type of hydrogen is significantly higher than the current internal combustion engine. This is because, as we all know, the fuel cells technology, at least in ASEAN, but that makes the technology for us is still expensive. Then, how about for the for the export markets? In views of the high upfront cost of building the hydrogen infrastructure for the domestic application of the hydrogen and the fuel cell, the alternative hydrogen opportunity for the region lie in exporting green and blue hydrogen to the other regions, such as the East Asia market, including Japan. From the calculation that we have of the existing data, we identified that Indonesia and Brunei Darussalam could produce the lowest cost of the hydrogen, around 5 USD per kilogram, in the form of the gray hydrogen. The cost from this country is somehow considered competitive for advanced markets such as Japan or Korea. But from the perspective of green hydrogen, the cost in all of the countries is still considering the high capital for the electrolyzer and high cost of renewable energies. So this to conclude, and the key observation that mentioned earlier, that ASEAN has a rich indigenous resource to produce, but the current level of the capex is considered still high. But then in the views of expected decrease in the capex both for the hydrogen production and transportation and LCOE, and also the formation of hydrogen market in overseas, such as China, Japan, and Korea, it could become competitive against the fossil fuels. Starting with what we have today, the green hydrogen produced from countries like Brunei and Indonesia could be already competitive, but then we expected the reduction of costs in coming years will make it further competitive. Last one, the moving forward, ASEAN is the beginning stage of the hydrogen development. Unlike Japan, we don't have a specific hydrogen strategy yet, perhaps only in the context of Singapore that last October released the strategy on hydrogen. But beyond that, ASEAN doesn't have a specific policy yet. That's why in these studies we recommended a 3 base of the regional policy roadmap for the ASEAN to pursue the hydrogen development in the stepwise basis, starting with the green hydrogen, then move to the blue hydrogen with the policy expected to be injected, then eventually by 2013 onward, the green hydrogen could be fully deployed to support the aspiration of the regions towards net zero. That concludes my presentation. Thank you very much for the opportunities, and here return back to the Mr. Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much sharing with us very detailed information about how hydrogen strategy in ASEAN and ASEAN countries could be considered developed. Thank you. And now we have 2 discussants. One from India, Dr. Girish Sethi, and the other from Japan, Dr. Kentaro Tamura. First, I would like to ask Dr. Sethi about his perspectives on hydrogen strategies in Asia. He's going to touch upon India's hydrogen strategy. So, Dr. Sethi, please.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mori-san, for the invitation. It's really a pleasure to join this session being moderated by you after a long time. I hope I am audible. Yeah, thank you. So before I just touch upon the India story, I think generally what has been talked about till now in this session, the subject is, can hydrogen help the world accelerate to net zero? So I think I'll just broadly mention that if we are really serious on this whole subject of net zero, either by 2050 or 2070, as India has announced, I think according to me, I think hydrogen will actually play a very, very important role, a major role in all economies around the world, including in Europe, in Asia, and obviously in India. And I'll try to substantiate this why I say this, it is extremely important by taking the argument or my point of reference as India. If one really looks at India today, India is one of the fastest growing economies in the world. Even immediately after the pandemic, why I say so, because we are growing at almost 6 to 8% annually, even during this period when we are talking about recessionary trends. And one of the prime drivers for this growth in India today has been seen is the role of infrastructure development. And if one looks at the key drivers for the infrastructure growth, whether it is in terms of the roads, infrastructure, the bridges, the railway networks, which are expanding at a fast pace, including, sir, I think also the support which the government of India gets from the Japanese government, from JBIC and others, for example, the fast metro networks in all the cities, or if one looks at the railway network, the Shinkansen type of trains which are going to ply between India in different cities, between, for example, Bombay and Ahmedabad, or between Delhi and Varanasi. So all these, why I'm mentioning all this is because if one really looks at this segment, all this requires huge investments in building materials, primarily things like steel, cement, and other materials. And of course, power and electricity in all these areas. So, and beyond the infrastructure, I think even the aspects related to housing and commercial sector development. We in India say that almost 2/3 of the commercial buildings are yet to be built in this country. So all these sectors require large quantities of materials like steel. And this brings me to the point of hydrogen, which is the focus of discussion. So in India, Terry did this study, I think around 1.5 years back, that what would be the potential role of hydrogen in a country like India. And as per our assessment and the work which we have done, we believe that the hydrogen requirement would increase from the present level of around 6 million tons, which we have in the country, to close to around 30 million tons in another 30 years by 2050 or so. And the primary requirement of hydrogen out of this increase up to 30 million tons would be almost 80% of it would actually be from the industrial sector. And we have not covered areas like shipping. In that, green shipping is another area if one looks at the export markets and all those things. This does not include the exports, of course, it's only the domestic requirement. So almost 80% of it is going to come from the industrial sector. And within this 80% demand of hydrogen, almost 40% of it is going to come from green steel, if one has to move towards steel. Today in India, we are producing close to around 100 million tons of steel. As per the Government of India estimates, in another 10 years or so, we'll be doubling or 2.5 times. And as per TERI estimates, in another 30 years, we will be increasing the steel production by 4 to 5 times. And this is just as an example. So that and steel assets, as you know, that they have a long shelf life. And blast furnaces typically last for 45 to 50 years. And if one were to build new capacities of steel based on the old technologies of blast furnaces using coking coal as an option, then we are not moving in the right direction. And already the technology of hydrogen-based DRI route is being talked about. So this is one area where I think a lot of demand for green hydrogen is going to come if one has to move towards a net zero. The second sector, I thought I'll just...
Please make it short. Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
So I'll just mention in another 2 minutes. So I think the other one which I just wanted to mention is the role of green ammonia, not just for as a fuel in different sectors, but also green ammonia in terms of production of fertilizer urea. So we are already using gray ammonia in this country, using gray hydrogen. So substitution towards green ammonia would really be beneficial. So broadly, I just wanted to mention that I think the demand for the green hydrogen is going to determine the production processes. So one normally talks about the chicken egg situation, whether supply should come first or the demand should come first. But today, I think the situation is that if one has to move in the direction of net zero, the demand for green hydrogen from these large sectors, whether it is the industries like steel and ammonia, or in terms of other sectors like power, which has been talked about, I think in case of Japan and ASEAN, or even in the transport sector to a certain extent, that would really make a real case for moving towards green hydrogen economy in a country like India. Thank you. I think I'll be happy to comment further in case required.
Yeah,
thank you.
Thank you very much. We do understand the importance of hydrogen, in particular for the industries, heavy industries in India. Thank you very much. Now, Tamura-san, your turn to share your perspectives on this hydrogen development for Asia.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much having me today. I really enjoyed the previous speaker's presentation. So I basically agree with that carbon-free hydrogen, or green hydrogen can play a critical role in achieving net zero Asia. But as a discussant, I provide some kind of a bit critical view on the wider application of hydrogen. So as previous speaker pointed out, hydrogen can be applied to a wide range of technology and processes and activities, which include chemical process and transport, heating and power system, and so on. And if all application could have been done, we could literally achieve the hydrogen-based society. In theory, that yes, but in reality, hydrogen application will face competition with alternative technology. So hydrogen have to compete with other fuel and other feedstock, and also what I think the biggest competitor for the hydrogen is electricity in the future. So as you know, that the electrification is one of the key pillars for achieving decarbonization. So that means that in order to achieve decarbonization or net zero emission, we have to promote electrification as much as possible. In parallel, in the long term, or in the next decade or so, thanks to the rapid cost down of the renewable power generation, as well as electrolyzer, we expect green hydrogen become cheaper than blue hydrogen. So this leads to one significant implication or robust conclusion that green hydrogen will be more costly than linear energy, because green hydrogen basically produced by green linear energy. So this leads to another important implication. So in area or application which can be easily electrified, it is difficult for hydrogen to diffuse. So there are many existing alternative technology for land transport, domestic heating, commercial heating, or low to mid temperature industrial heating by electrification. So my conclusion, so it is critically important to prioritize hydrogen application use where there is no alternative technology or alternatives. So such prioritized area includes chemical and process, as Seti-san pointed out, and also some, other industrial process, and also probably long-term energy storage for the power system. But in other words, hydrogen can or should play critical role in so-called hard to abate sector. But hard to abate sector means hard to electrify sector. So, but I'm a bit skeptical about the extent to which hydrogen can be applied beyond such hard to abate sector. So that's in my view. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tamura-san, for your very interesting, important view about the role of green hydrogen, particularly in future, in relation to total electrification. Thank you very much. Now we have two presenters and two discussions for this session. And Q&A session will be held after the next session. So please stay with us. And I'm going to now ask Dr. Eric Strassman to take care of the second session. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mori-san and colleagues, for very interesting and rich discussion of the prospects and some of the challenges to mainstreaming hydrogen in different countries across Asia. I think we learned a lot about some of these opportunities and some of the prospects moving forward. For this session, I think we're going to continue to dig into some of these issues by looking at hydrogen development and global experiences. Toward that end, I'd like to start the session off with a presentation from colleagues from Brazil. So this will be on hydrogen development, Brazil's experience, and the presentation will come from Professor Silvio Vieira de Mello. He is at the Energy and Environment Graduate Program Director for the Federal University of Bahia in Brazil. So Professor Silvio, the floor is over to you.
Hello, everyone. First of all, I'd like to thank the IDES for the opportunity to discuss some current and future ideas on green hydrogen. Especially many thanks to Dr. Nanda Kumar for this kind invitation. Brazil is worldwide known for its energy matrix, mainly constituted of renewable sources. As you can see, about 49% of the total energy in Brazil is from renewable resources, and in terms of power, about 85%. Also, you can see that the renewable fuels production capacity is growing faster than the fossil fuels in Brazil. until 2020. You can see that it's a very evident growth. I want to give you some numbers about the hydrogen scenario. For instance, Petrobras, the oil and gas company in Brazil, produces about 1.6 million tons per year of hydrogen, while the world produces about 70 million tons per year. Of course, 98% of this hydrogen produced via natural gas or naphtha steam reform. Brazil has also a prominent role in renewable fuels, mainly ethanol from sugarcane, but also hydroelectricity. So I think green hydrogen is a good opportunity for Brazil, and we have some very recently initiatives, most in the Northeast region. I can cite Pecém in Ceará, Swap in Pernambuco, and Camaçari in Bahia. Here I show the maps of Brazil and the state of Bahia. Bahia is the 5th state in Brazil in area and 4th in population. I want to give you an example. The total area of Bahia is about 1.5 the size of Japan. And we have also the most extended coast in Brazil of about 2,000 kilometers. Bahia is also the biggest economy in the Northeast region of Brazil. In this figure, you can see the main projects on green hydrogen in Brazil. Basically, we are taking advantage of a surplus of photovoltaic and wind energy in this region. Bahia is this part, this state. Okay, I don't want to talk about the hydrogen in the whole country, because Brazil is a very big country and there are a lot of initiatives, but the main projects are in the Northeast region. So I do the Bahia state as my case start today. Bahia has a considerable potential for renewable energy, particularly solar and wind energy, but also many agricultural residues that come from crops, fruits, cacao, eucalyptus, and so on. Also, we have about 50 kilometers far from Salvador, the capital of Brazil, we have Camaçari petrochemical complex that is the biggest integrated petrochemical complex in the southern hemisphere. So this is also a big opportunity for green hydrogen. Very briefly, this is the wind atlas of Bahia, where you can see that Bahia has the greatest wind energy potential in Brazil, and it's the wind energy production with about 35% of the total in the country. And basically this yellow, red and purple region is the most important region for wind energy. Also for solar energy, we have great potential. We lead about 30% of the total production in the country, and there is a lot of new infrastructure projects for this area. And also we have the possibility to use wind and solar energy combined as complementarity of sources. So we have a good potential for hybrid parks. And of course, to produce green hydrogen, we need not only electricity, but water. Water is an important source. And in Bahia, we have groundwater and also rivers that can supply to these facilities. It's important to highlight also that In Bahia, we have the largest economic hub in the Northeast Brazil. This is the All Saints Bay area, very close to Salvador, the capital. And we have the second largest oil refinery in the country. We have the Camaçari petrochemical complex. We have an industrial district. We have LNG regasification terminal, shipyard, 2 public ports, and so on. But of course, Bahia is a very big state, and we also aim to develop other parts of the state with decentralized hubs for green hydrogen. Okay, this can include steel industry, mining, agri-industry, cement industry, and we can have also not only hydrogen, but for instance, ammonia. Fertilizers are very important for our economy. And of course, another option is renewable hydrogen that comes from biomass gasification that we can associate with CO2 capture. So in this case, now we need the biorefinery concept. I mean, we can produce hydrogen from biomass gasification. In the syngas, we have hydrogen, carbon monoxide, and carbon dioxide, so we can separate hydrogen, or we can use syngas for production of intermediate chemicals or fuels, and you can also separate CO2. Okay, by the end of the process, we will have combustion and CO2, so we need to recycle that can meet the targets of zero carbon emissions. So this is another possibility that you can also combine, of course, with green hydrogen from electrolysis. To give you an example of CO2 capture, the CUS project in Brazil are very important. In 2021, Petrobras will inject around 8.7 million tons of CO2, and that is producing our pre-salt fields. And the accumulated is about 30 million tons of CO2 since 2008. And this is the largest CCUS project in the world. And of course, that's hydrogen is a new opportunity that emerges from our energy sources. Some concluding remarks. Fossil fuels still have a long life with the world energy matrix, at least until 2050, 2070. Of course, each country has its own strategy for renewable energies, and there is no dominant one. Each country should analyze its potentials and its strategies. And in particular, Brazil has a strong base on renewables, like ethanol, hydroelectricity, biodiesel, and of course, we are expanding to green hydrogen. There is a huge market for photovoltaics and wind power in Bahia, of course, in other regions of Brazil too. The necessary land for wind farm and photovoltaic areas lower than sugarcane areas for ethanol production. We have also great opportunities for green hydrogen or renewable hydrogen in integrated biorefinery. There is a potential for reforestation in Brazil due to this new initiative. Of course, circular economy is another important point because we need to assure recycling of photovoltaic and wind turbines and so on. And of course, investigation of green hydrogen impact on rivers and aquifers should be carried out. Some acknowledgements and some people that have given me information to this presentation. And thank you very much for this opportunity, and I'm available for questions and any other information you have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Silvio. It's really wonderful to have some of your insights coming to us from Brazil. And just hearing your presentation, I mean, I think it really underlines for us that this is a global issue and has global dimensions. I think, you know, in Asia, we obviously recognize the importance of hydrogen, but we also are seeing that it has broad implications for Latin America as well. And I think it'll be interesting moving forward to consider, you know, some of the comparisons across countries and across regions and how hydrogen evolves and develops. So I think your insights are very, very useful, and we really appreciate you being here to share those with us today. What I'd like to do now is actually, we have a slight change in our program. So I'd like to actually move up one of our presenters. This is Mr. Mehmet Ogatku. He is the chairman of the London Energy Club and Global Resource Partners based in the UK. Mr. Ogatku will be talking about global hydrogen geopolitics, which once again underlines the salience of global dimensions of hydrogen and also taps into some of the points that were raised in the initial framing presentation from my colleague Nandu about the geopolitical dimensions of this issue. So I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Ogatku, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Eric, for inviting me to join this panel. I'm joining you from Brussels, actually. I came here for discussions with the EU officials, organized together with the Germans, because hydrogen is becoming increasingly very important in the energy mix and the future prospects. And we are going through a critical time. As you know, the European Union is trying to construct a new energy supply architecture without Russia. Russia, which is, as we know, is critical in fossil fuels, one of the largest producers of oil, gas, and also very active in nuclear, coal, and how it's going to be constructed is a matter of great concern here, because EU is going to have a tough winter now coming, but also 2023 will be even worse. Therefore, in these discussions, bigger discussions about the energy supply for Europe and globally, hydrogen is figuring prominently as an alternative source. And again, Russia has very ambitious plans in hydrogen as well. And it is planning to produce around 50 million tons of hydrogen, which is equivalent to 150 BCM of gas, which is more or less what European Union used to import from Russia before the war in Ukraine. And European Union altogether is producing about 50% of its needs, projected needs in hydrogen. So other 50 will have to come from countries where there will be abundance of low cost renewables, because the gray and blue hydrogen are not preferred here like anywhere else in the world. For the green hydrogen, you need land, you need water, and you need space where it is also conducive and relatively stable. And the question we have here, yes, we have all discussions about the production, technology, transport, trade, finance involved in incentivizing greater use of green hydrogen, but also I think the geopolitics that you mentioned at the beginning will be no less important than in the case of oil, gas, and renewables increasingly. And strategic choke points, the pipelines, the tankers, and the haves and have-nots, because most of the hydrogen will be consumed in markets where there is a high demand, which are far away from the production centers. Therefore, again, geopolitics will come into picture, both in the sense of protecting shipping lanes, pipeline security, cyber security, but also about the rules of the game globally, because there are no rules right now. EU and Japan are collaborating each other, I know, to achieve sustainable, affordable production, transportation, and trade of hydrogen, green hydrogen especially. But still, we are far from developing international rules of the game, standards that can help the industry to grow. And some of the fossil fuel exporters, like in the Gulf as well, they are investing heavily in green hydrogen because this is going to diversify their economy and create new export industries. As they see that fossil fuels right now accounting for almost 80% of the world's energy mix, one day will be gradually phased out. Not altogether, because in the foreseeable future, we know that fossil fuels will be still our future, but the trend is towards net zero targets 2050, and there will be less and less reliance on fossil fuels. How this is going to be achieved, this is what we are discussing here in Brussels with EU officials as well. But clearly, hydrogen will disrupt future energy systems. And therefore, we have to think about the trade, international collaboration, geopolitical tensions that this will entail, willingly or unwillingly. We have to be prepared for that. Even for renewables, we haven't still sorted out how we are going to address geopolitical risks, because as you know, some of the critical material used in renewable energy technologies, like lithium, cobalt, nickel, and those countries producing them, and also, of course, some rare earth metals, minerals, all of them will be as important as oil and gas in the future energy supply pictures. And the geopolitics of that, where you are producing it, be in Africa, Latin America, Australia, of course, is going to affect our future energy systems significantly. And so we have to recognize that hydrogen will bring shifts in geopolitical equations. What we see now, the world is being polarized in such a significant manner after the war in Ukraine. But I think this is only a test of what's to come in the future. The expectation is that despite all this nice words exchange in Indonesia between Biden and Xi Jinping, clearly there is going to be a broader confrontation, tension, conflict between the United States and China. And hydrogen also will play an important role in this future evolution of the conflict between these two superpowers, I might call. And energy-wise, of course, US is now on the way to become the biggest producers of oil and gas, already in oil, but also the gas, dethroning Russia, and in LNG as well. It's going to become a major power, perhaps outweighing Australia, Qatar, and other major LNG producers. Then on the other hand, you have China, which is a producer as well, but largely now becoming a consumer. Number one importer of crude oil, number four in natural gas, and you name it. And hydrogen in China is very important, but it's not so green right now. And the gray hydrogen, blue hydrogen, will emit more carbon dioxide than anything else. It's also going to become, of course, less expensive than the green hydrogen, 4 or 5 times. And the cost is a very major factor here. Look at Europe now. I mean, Germany is suffering a great deal from this energy sanctions. It's a boomerang effect it had, rather than damaging Russia's position. And it has damaged the European Union economy significantly. And 5 times higher energy prices now on average in Europe. This is eroding competitiveness of Germany, for example. It has become, as we know, the locomotive of the exports in European Union countries. And it is going to have serious difficulty. There are some shutdowns of factories, or suspension of production here and there, and energy saving measures everywhere. It's now 18 degrees where I am. Normally it's 21, 22. So it's going to be a tough period. And hydrogen, of course, is not going to replace natural gas tomorrow, in industrial processes especially. Also, we have to bear in mind that just like oil and gas and renewables, hydrogen will play an important role in ensuring competitiveness globally for countries. But right now it's very expensive, as we all know. Like in photovoltaic solar power or wind, I think the cost per kilowatt hour will come down in the future. There's no doubt about that. And I think one important thing is that we shouldn't make the same mistakes that we have done in extractive industries. When we get into a new source of energy, I think we are in a position to learn from our past mistakes and rectify them. And so it's not only the reduction of carbon emissions that hydrogen is aiming at. It has to be green, of course, for climate change, but it has also to provide sustainable and affordable energy. So there has to be multiple benefits that it will bring to the table. And I was looking at the German case here, and as they are investing a lot in technology, production techniques, but they have to depend heavily, as I said, only in the European Union context. Almost half of their production will have to come from countries that are developing or emerging nations around Europe. And then they have to pay attention not only for the production of hydrogen there in an affordable and sustainable manner, but also how to bring it to their markets. Again, using tankers, pipelines, and other means will involve this way or another the geopolitical flare-ups as we are witnessing today. So don't forget, it was before economy stupid, as you remember Clinton used to say, but now it's becoming more and more geopolitics alongside the economic, technology, finance rationals. So in any attempt, we develop international collaboration and also joint activities. I think there will be a cleavage between nations on blue, gray, and green hydrogen matters, but also on how to ensure that geopolitical risks will be mitigated. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us from Brussels, Mr. Ogatu, and thank you for, reminding us about some of these geopolitical risks, as well as the potential rewards of collaboration. And it seems like this is very much a dynamic and evolving landscape that you're helping to shape right now, and that's incredibly important. And we're really lucky to have you here to share some of those insights as we see sort of those shifts take place. I would like to ask you and also our other speakers to kindly look at some of the questions. So I think you could offer some interesting insights to some of the questions that are raised in the question and answer area, and we'll also raise some questions towards the end as well. But I think we're making some nice headway in trying to understand the different dimensions of this issue and how those dimensions cut across countries and cut across different sets of concerns. And so with that backdrop, I'd like to now move on to our next speaker. And our next speaker is talking about the development, especially of green hydrogen. And this is Miss Joanna Kay. She's an advisor. She works for Advisor Strategy in the Asia Pacific office, or she is a strategic advisor for the International Solar Alliance in the Asia Pacific office, and based in India. And so, Ms. Kay, the floor is over to you.
Thank you, Eric. And I'm assuming that I'm now audible. So that's quite helpful. Fantastic. Thank you, Mahit, for your take on the geopolitical challenges globally. I think we cannot understate those challenges and what it means for sovereign nations to be able to have their energy security and national security more broadly. I'm delighted to join you today from Delhi as part of the International Solar Alliance. As Eric mentioned, I'm the Senior Advisor for Asia and the Pacific. Really looking at how we can diversify, I guess, renewable energy more broadly so that we can meet those clean energy targets. During my presentation today, I'm going to give you an overview of the Australian renewable hydrogen sector and talk to you a little bit about what the Australian government is doing and what the Australian industry is doing and how they are driving that change. So many of you on this forum today have already mentioned the potential for hydrogen to play a major part in the future energy mix. And if we can harness renewable hydrogen in key industries such as shipping, air transport, long range, road transport, steel manufacturing, we can achieve a global clean energy transition and deliver on net zero. So at the fourth assembly of the International Solar Alliance, the ISA launched a program for green hydrogen, and it was all about accelerating the production of renewable hydrogen and the utilization of that hydrogen within ISA member countries, all of which we have 102 globally. We've seen significant interest and focus on renewable hydrogen from all of our member countries as a means to achieve the global energy transition. We've seen the uptake of renewable energy at unprecedented levels, and thus the cost associated with those renewables has fallen significantly. And we see this trend in renewable hydrogen as well. We know that as the costs of electrifiers continues to fall and global demand increases, we can see that many countries are beginning to adopt hydrogen strategies in a bid to decarbonize the global economy. Australia is one of those countries that has a national hydrogen strategy, as does Japan. And we have declared our ambition to be a major player in global hydrogen production and trade by 2030. We have an abundance of renewable energy resources in Australia and geographically placed to take advantage of significant increase in the expected demand of clean hydrogen, particularly in Asian markets. Whilst Australia is still reliant on carbon-intensive industries, we can see political will and industry shift towards renewables. This is evident in our success and our stature of renewable hydrogen. We must continue to be cognizant of potential greenwashing in the hydrogen sector, and we must seek to invest and drive renewable hydrogen as the only source of hydrogen as we move forward to net zero. So within Australia, our new Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, has committed to putting Australia at the forefront of action in the global climate change. The government has committed a more ambitious target to 2030 to reduce emissions by 43% below the 2005 levels, thus putting Australia on track to achieve net zero by 2050. The Australian government continues to implement new domestic policies around renewable energy to support Australia to become a clean energy superpower. And these policies aim to provide certainty and commitment to Australia's resolve to mobilise investment to achieve that clean energy superpower status. In 2019, the Australian government launched its national hydrogen strategy under the guidance of Dr. Alan Finkel, the chief scientist at the time. And the strategy provides a roadmap for Australia's commitment to be a major player in global hydrogen production and trade by 2030. It provides a framework for the hydrogen sector to create jobs, attract and mobilise investment, to open new export markets, and especially as demand for fossil fuel exports continues to decline. Renewable hydrogen must be at the forefront of all things hydrogen, as it makes sense economically and it makes sense for countries to honour their commitment to these climate goals. The government in Australia is funding a variety of demonstration projects and hydrogen hubs. These hydrogen hubs are regions where various producers, users, potential exporters of hydrogen across industrial, transport, export, and energy markets are all co-located, thus giving the renewable hydrogen industry an early stage springboard to scale to which can support other industrial sectors in the region. An example, the Townsville Hydrogen Hub initiative and the $454 million Regional Hydrogen Hubs program will deliver the Australian government centres in Gladstone, the Hunter region, Bell Bay and the Pilbara. These investments help develop Australia's renewable hydrogen industry and boost domestic decarbonisation efforts. More broadly, we all know that investment and research and development in key demonstration projects supports the growth of global renewable hydrogen. The Low Emissions Technology Statement by the Department of Climate Change, Energy, Environment and Water provides the government with a mechanism to review and refine and evaluate how the government can invest in low emissions technology. This, along with other government initiatives, have provided a benchmark for bilateral and multilateral engagements. Initiatives such as the Accelerate Low Emissions Technologies with Singapore, support to export to Japan, and I know one of my colleagues previously talked about this as part of the Australian Clean Hydrogen Trade Program. We've collaborated in research and technology exchange on hydrogen under the Australia and Republic of Korea Low and Zero Emissions Technology Partnership. We're working with India to drive down the cost of solar and clean hydrogen, and promoting hydrogen safety best practice as a member of the US Centre of Hydrogen Safety. And we must recognise that to drive clean energy transition, industry and government must work together. They must work together to strengthen our resolve. This isn't a unique situation to Australia, but we see this as around the world as countries continue to grapple their next steps in the clean energy transition. We do see a reliance on industry to drive that change. In Australia, the organisation Hydrogen Australia, a division of the Smart Energy Council, has launched a zero carbon certification scheme. This industry-driven guarantee of origin style scheme promotes and updates the distribution of renewable hydrogen products and their derivatives in Australia and overseas. This program by Hydrogen Australia aims to accelerate the development and deployment of renewable hydrogen, green ammonia and green metals in Australia and around the world. Industry-led initiatives like this from Hydrogen Australia are driving our renewable hydrogen sector by enabling hydrogen and related products to be certified with zero emissions. International initiatives like the Green Hydrogen Organisation bring together leaders from Australia, Chile, Japan and Korea, and are steered by the Honourable Mr. Malcolm Turnbull, a former Australian politician who held the seat of the 29th Prime Minister of Australia. Green Hydrogen Organisation brings together government, industry and civil society to enable a rapid uptake of global green hydrogen. We look at our domestic success in Australia, we've seen that the Australian Renewable Energy Agency, ARENA, has close to 40 projects in the pipeline that span feasibility studies, demonstration projects, and research and development. The demonstrations projects alone amount to over $100 million in project costs. We also have a few notable highlights from the industry, and I won't go through an extensive list, but I feel that these three really capture the industry in Australia at the moment. We have renewable energy company CWP Global. They are developing one of the world's largest renewable power projects in the Pilbara region in Western Australia. This is a 26 gigawatt wind and solar to hydrogen Asia renewable hub. Global Energy Ventures, GEV, have developed an approach to hydrogen transport that includes a simple and energy efficient technology to reduce the cost of hydrogen delivery through energy businesses in Europe and in Asia. A Perth-based company, Long Pipes Limited, have devised a revolutionary technology that can lower the cost of piped hydrogen. These examples reaffirm the growth in renewable hydrogen in Australia and Australia's standing in the market. I think to finish up, we must look at the challenges that are facing renewable hydrogen globally, and they aren't dissimilar to other sectors in renewable energy. Demand will always drive competitive price points, and increased demand will lower costs of key technology like electrolyzers. We know that with increased investment from industry and government in research and development, technology will continue to drive an economic and environmental benefits that we need. We know that if we increase scale globally, we will create economies of scale and increase price points in this area as well. We must continue to challenge global policymakers and political leaders to create policy that support the adaptation of renewable hydrogen as the key viable source in the renewable energy sector. Mobilization of investment in production and manufacturing of green hydrogen will be imperative to leading a carbon-free power source to achieve a net zero world. And Australia, through industry-led initiatives and government policies, is steadfast in its conviction of being a clean energy superpower. We will continue to see rapid growth in renewable hydrogen globally, and we must be steadfast in our conviction to drive the sustainable industry that will be imperative to global carbonization. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Joanna, for giving us this very nice overview of some of the activities that are being promoted as part of Australia's efforts to achieve net zero. And once again, I mean, interesting that you're giving this presentation here from Delhi. I mean, I have to say that not only am I learning a lot about the different aspects of hydrogen, but recognizing that this community is, strung together across the world. I think this is a really nice opportunity to share these and perspectives, and really happy to be doing this from IGES. Once again, we do have some questions in the question box, so please do take a look. And if some of those are already answered, that's fine. I would like to now turn it over to one of my colleagues, Dr. Mustafa Moinuddin. And Mustafa is going to be talking to us from the friendly confines of his home here in Japan. Mustafa is a deputy director at the Integrated Sustainability Center at our institute. And he will be talking to us today about the global hydrogen development and the techno-economic aspects. And I know he's been doing some good work with Dr. Nandu and others on these issues, so we look forward to hearing from him. Mustafa, the floor is over to you.
Thank you very much, Eric. Let me share my screen. Hi, everybody, and thanks one more time, Eric. My name is Mustafa from the Integrated Sustainability Center of IGS, and I'm very delighted to share some of my views related to techno-economic aspects of global hydrogen development. Let me start with a quote from Carl Johan Winter from the International Association of Hydrogen Energy from 2006. It's very simple. He said that energy policy is technology politics. What he means by this is, I'll try to explain it briefly. First, a new energy does not enter the market because old ones are nearing or have already been depleted. So even if we have some of the old technologies and they are not being depleted, still a new energy can enter a market. And a new energy never fully replaces the old ones. Rather, advances in technology, for example, exploitation and storage, transportation and utilization, all these progresses, developments enable a new energy to enter into the market. Thus, it is the energy technologies that can compete with each other, not the fuels, not necessarily the energy raw materials. So that's why he said energy policy is technology politics. If we look at the history of energy transition, like the evolution of global energy mix in the last 200 years, we can see what he meant by this. The energy transition that took place over this period of time has been geared by the economic and technological advances. For example, coal was basically useless before steam engine was invented, or like oil demand increased when gasoline vehicles took off. So all these things actually suggest what Dr. Winter mentioned in the previous slide. Now moving on to these techno-economic aspects, first I want to mention that the commercial production and use of hydrogen is not something new. We have already been producing and using hydrogen for over 100 years. And hydrogen can be produced from a variety of energy resources and through a range of technological processes. And currently it is being used for various industrial purposes, such as petroleum refineries. However, the renewed interest is more towards substituting conventional fossil fuels, which means that the production processes have to be both environmentally viable and economically feasible. You see, this is a very like a condensed slide. I will not go into the details, but basically here I have tried to review the existing hydrogen production technologies, looking at this technology from what kind of resources are being used to produce hydrogen, the key aspects in terms of efficiency and use, environmental impacts, as well as economic viabilities. So this provides kind of a summary of what the available hydrogen production technologies. So what we see is that at present, almost all hydrogen is generated from fossil fuels like natural gas or coal, with steam reforming of hydrocarbon as the most significant technology. But this does not deliver the environmental benefits. Green hydrogen, we have been talking about it a lot today. Green hydrogen, which is hydrogen produced from renewables using electrolysis, remains as the most environment-friendly approach. But these renewable resources-based technologies are either not yet that cost-efficient or not mature enough for their widespread deployment. And currently, this process is expensive compared to the not-so-green alternatives. But there are some ray of light. If you look at the figure on the right side, you can see that the recent, based on some recent estimates, some level of cost competitiveness of the lower range of the green hydrogen with the blue hydrogen is already visible. So at present, green hydrogen per kilogram costs between 2.5 to $6 US, and over time, it's expected to come down significantly and become more competitive with conventional fuels. The interest in hydrogen, as well as the advances in technological innovation, is quite clear if you look at this the graph over here, which gives you the deployment of electrolyzers around the world. According to a recent IEA report, electrolysis technology has become mature enough for scaling up, and the figure shows that a relatively sharp increase in electrolyzer deployment since 2018, which means that the interest as well as the technological advances are kind of pacing up. I want to move on to something slightly different, which related to how technological diffusion unfolds and how infrastructure and enabling conditions actually matter a lot here. This is basically from a 2003 study by Victor Heller and Victor, where they explored this issue from two different sectors of technology as example. Okay, first one is about computer memory, and the second sector is primary fuels. So in this slide, I'm talking about the computer memories, the random access memories. The figure you see on the right side, it shows the market share of multiple generations of RAMs, random access memories, over years from 1970 to 2005. If you look at the graph carefully, you'll see that there are rapid changes in the market share. For example, almost like every 5 years, and usually one new generation of RAM technology is competing with two of the previous versions at the same time in the market. We see a very regular pattern of innovation, diffusion, saturation, and replacement of this the older generation. And the reason why RAMs were scalable was because the major components of the PC infrastructure, such as power supplies, monitors, printers, and so on, they were not that much affected by memory upgrades. So in other words, the infrastructure, the PC infrastructure was capable of accepting or adapting the newer version of these RAMs, the memory chips. But if you look at the primary fuels, here we're giving an example of in the United States, you see a completely different trend. For example, it took like 200 years for coal to raise its market share from 10% to 80%. Subsequent fuels, subsequent technologies, also like hydropower or oil or gas also were faster, but also overall change was quite slow. Means that unlike the computer chips, for primary fuels, it is a change in the whole system, including the whole supply infrastructure. And also when you invest in this kind of infrastructure, there are interlocking effects which will eventually make the change much, much slower because of this incumbents' interest in maintaining the maintaining the existing infrastructure. So basically, a few takeaway points here is first, the notion of a hydrogen-based economy is surely gaining momentum. We have heard a lot today in the presentation from various speakers. For example, a recent report from IEA on the future of hydrogen actually encouraged various countries and the businesses to initiate hydrogen-related programs, the investment programs as well as projects. And also we received some impatience from the ongoing energy crisis, the geopolitical developments, and so on. But when we talk about green hydrogen, one of the major challenges is the high cost. So the reduction of electrolyzer costs will be crucial in the hydrogen rollout. And then based on my previous two slides, technology, along with technology, we also need infrastructure for exploitation, storage, and transport, utilization of hydrogen. And when I talk about infrastructure, I refer to both hard and soft infrastructure, because we also need rules and regulations enabling conditions to promote the hydrogen rollout. And last but not the least, we also need to create a market for hydrogen. Tamura-san was talking about the prioritized sectors for the real use of hydrogen. So I think when there is when there is a demand in the market, the technology progression as well as the market maturity will become faster. That's all from my side. Thank you very much. I'll be happy to respond to any questions or any other information that you may have. Thank you.
Okay, thanks so much, Mustafa, for sharing with us this nice overview of some of the technical and economic aspects of especially green hydrogen, and illustrating for us, where we are in terms of cost competitiveness of green hydrogen and where we need to be. I think this is one of the critical questions that has been running throughout the discussion today, is really to go back to your slides where you showed, the sort of bar graph on how do we move the costs of green hydrogen down to a place where they're cost competitive with the other forms of hydrogen. And I think you really spotlighted that issue in a way that will hopefully spur some good discussions. So at this point, we've had several interesting presentations, and I'd like to see if we have any questions or answers from the question and answer box. And you know what, to try to sort of stimulate discussion across the different groups, if you don't mind, Mr. Sethi, Girish Sethi, you were discussing, I believe, in the previous session, and speaking from some of the work that you've done at TERI. I don't know if you'd like to offer some of your own views on especially from a developing country perspective, what we might see as some of the challenges and opportunities in India versus what we saw from Australia, EU. So I wonder if you want to just maybe comment a little bit on some of the differences in the challenges and opportunities for collaboration, and also perhaps raise some questions for some of the speakers in this last session. So I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Sethi. Is that okay?
Yeah, thanks, Eric. I think I did mention about in the previous session, which Mori-san was moderating, I did mention briefly about India in terms of the demand which is going to come in from primarily large sectors like steel in the country like India. But of course, I think the discussions which have happened, I think the challenges which one is talking about globally in other parts of the world, whether it is from the ASEAN region or in Japan. I think in India also we are grappling with such issues of the cost of hydrogen today. But I think, as I very briefly mentioned earlier, to me, I think it's a situation of rapidly scaling up the demand for green hydrogen. If the policies can be put in place where one can have, say, buyer clubs where you can buy electricity, where you can buy products made from green hydrogen, whether it is green ammonia or something like that, that will spur the policies, the demand in the respective countries in terms of developing the required infrastructure which has to be put in place. So, as somebody pointed out, I think one of the speakers mentioned that hydrogen is not something new. I think it was Mustafa. It has been around for so many years. Even electrolysis of water to produce green hydrogen, that technology also has been known for years. But what is the difference today? Why we are talking about it again? It's perhaps because, yes, the climate issue, the need for net zero, and hydrogen can play a role there. But I think now also the developments which are happening around the world, whether it is of the electrolyzers or the balance of equipment, and then the demand which has to come in from these sectors. So to me, all these things are coming together now, which is actually can help accelerate the process, because that's where the whole discussion is. Of course, the challenge, the biggest one, of course, remains, as you mentioned, is the cost. But if we can accelerate that process, things will move in the right place. So I'm optimistic from that perspective, I would say.
Thanks so much, Girish, and it's really nice to see you again after all these years. Actually, it's been a long time, but it's good to see you on video. All right, so I'd like to raise a question for all of the panelists, and it gets to the heart of some of the points that were raised by Girish and Mustafa and Nandu and others. And it really, I think it speaks to this idea of how do we, rapidly stimulate demand for green hydrogen, and in doing so, lower the costs. But the question really is a political economy question, and it also gets to some of the geopolitics questions that were raised previously. I want to hear some people's thoughts on not on the geopolitics, but on the domestic political economy challenges to rapidly scaling up green hydrogen. Because as a political scientist, one of my impressions of what's happening in this space is that there's perhaps some interests that maybe not so supportive of the transition to greener forms of hydrogen, and maybe content, with blue or gray forms of hydrogen. So I just wondered if anybody, from either an Australian perspective, or from European perspective, or from Brazilian perspective, can anybody comment, within those different regions on some of the political economy challenges, whether or not there are different industries and interests that might not be so supportive, and if that is the case, how can we form alliances that will help either overcome those vested interests or create some opportunities for collaboration so that we can move forward with green hydrogen? Does anybody want to speak to the political economy questions? So I see a panelist hopefully raising hand. Thank you. Trying to figure out who that person is, though. Who was the panelist that was raising their hand? That was Nanda Kumar. Yes, looking very suave. Yes, go ahead, Nandu.
Thank you so much, Eric. So thank you so much, Eric, for raising this question, because this is something which I have tried to outline in my presentation as well, that how important it is to look at hydrogen development from the three perspectives of policy, technology, and politics. And especially from the policy perspective, we know that the policy apparatus countries have in supporting hydrogen is it's still in a sort of an evolving stage. And there's a lot of churning has to happen to make the entire environment conducive for development of hydrogen. Personally, I feel that hydrogen is going through a sort of an evolutionary phase like what renewable has witnessed several decades back. Until recently, we all recall that at every stage, renewable was under criticism. For example, challenging its feasibility, challenging its availability in terms of technology, and its solar electricity's intermittency or wind energy's intermittency. So all these actually challenges have been there in discussion for long. But today, after all these discussions, we can see that, in some parts of the world, renewable electricity is sort of reaching lesser than coal-based electricity in terms of cost. So my feeling is that it's going to be a learning curve there, which is definitely going to bring down the cost, and a policy apparatus, which is a necessary policy apparatus, need to be in place in terms, and also sort of as technology. And specifically when I talk about technology, I know that there's a huge demand for electrolyzers are already in place, especially from countries like Australia, India, and China. And I believe, once again, I want to say that, there is a fear factor about, or not fear factor, sort of a skepticism about hydrogen is there, and that once we are able to overcome that factor, definitely green hydrogen will find a tremendous growth. Thank you so much, Eric.
Okay, thanks very much, Nandu. That's greatly appreciated. I want to ask our colleagues for instance, from Brazil, about the feasibility issue. So Dr. Silvio, I don't know if you could offer some insights into, we heard a little bit about the economic challenges, but also the political challenges. Do you sense there are any political challenges to moving forward with green hydrogen in the Brazilian context?
Oh, thank you for the question. I think the perspective in Brazil are very promising. As you know, we are changing the president, and all the energy policies in Brazil are under review. So I think from the 1st of January, many changes will come in Brazil. And in case of hydrogen, green hydrogen, and feasibility, it's a complex issue. But in some cases, for instance, in Brazil, depending on the period of the year, we can have some electricity surplus. For instance, hydroelectric power. And so, if there is a lot of water, what can we do? So we can use the surplus to storage in hydrogen, or is a possibility. No? Of course, that we need infrastructure. We need a lot of grids, electricity grids. So a lot of challenges. We need good policies. We need cooperation. We need technological cooperation. But I think it's a good way to go. Okay. We cannot speak in a unique solution for a so complex system like energy system. So hydrogen is one more option that depends on the situations, on the country, on the geopolitical conditions. So we have, it's good because we have one more alternative that needs development, but we need a lot of time to say that it's a feasible option. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Silvio. That's really useful for us, and it really, I think, once again opens our eyes to how this issue is playing out in Latin America. At this point, we're sort of winding down the session, but I do want to highlight that as we think about prospects for especially expansion of green hydrogen, our colleagues had a very nice session in our ISAP. This is the International Forum for Sustainable Asia Pacific, where Tamura-san, who was a discussant, presented on how we can transition into green hydrogen. And I believe that session will be coming up online in the not too distant future. Further, our colleague Nandu Kumar and Mustafa and Mori-san, many colleagues have been working on this issue at IGES, and there are several publications already out talking about the different dimensions of feasibility. So as that is a sort of backdrop, I would like to suggest that we're going to turn it over now for some closing remarks to our colleagues from our colleague from the Ministry of Environment in Japan. But please do consult some of the work that IGES is doing in this space. And I see this dialogue as a continuing dialogue. I think we've got some really interesting insights, and we look forward to, as we close off today's session, to keeping that door open for more exchange. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Kazuya Inoue. He is the Director of Climate Change Policy Division at the Ministry of Environment in Japan. And I think it's really appropriate that we're hearing from colleagues from both the MOEJ and METI on this issue. So Inoue-san, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon to all. It's my great pleasure to participate and offer concluding remarks at this webinar organized by the Institute for Global Environmental Strategy. Japan has been one of the leading players in the development of hydrogen technology for many years. In 2017, Japan formulated world's first basic hydrogen strategy, adopting a national framework that sets the outline of policy on hydrogen and fuel cells. And now, Japan is promoting green transformation, or GX, to achieve net zero GHG emissions, as well as strengthen industrial competitiveness and lead to economic growth at the same time. To realize the net zero target by 2050 and move forward in this critical decade, we are considering all possible measures to draw out bold GX investments in Japan. One of the pillars is hydrogen. In order to promote the utilization of hydrogen, it's necessary to develop technology for production, storage, and usage of hydrogen, as well as to reduce the price. In Japan, a 2 trillion yen Green Innovation Fund has been established to conduct intensive technology development for green transformation. Within this fund, we are also working on the establishment of a supply chain and production methods of hydrogen, and the R&D and implementation of decarbonization technologies using hydrogen. We are also studying a system compensate for price difference between natural gas and hydrogen in order to promote the conversion. Today's webinar covered a key debate in Asia and beyond the global East. It's important to note that green hydrogen can emerge to play a major role in Asia's energy mix for the year to come. Similar other parts of the world also have been accelerating green hydrogen production, which reflects a stronger role for green hydrogen in the global energy mix. We'd like to expand our hydrogen technologies and know-how to other countries in the world, especially in the Asian Pacific. Japan has a mechanism called JCM, under which greenhouse gases reduced by leading technology transfer from Japan are converted into carbon credit and be used for NDC. Furthermore, we also aim to realize the Asian Zero Emission Community concept through utilizing green finance and transition finance mechanisms. and through the effective use of hydrogen, energy efficiency, renewable energy, CCUS. Today's webinar has presented several key major aspects of the development of the global green hydrogen sector and its role in the net zero transition. I hope this webinar would stimulate further research and help forge newer collaboration among IGS and experts and participants gathered here. By congratulating the organizer and panelists, I'd like to conclude my remarks. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Inoue-san, and we really appreciate you closing off the webinar. Just to reiterate from one of the questions that was raised in the question answer box, this webinar and the slides that were presented herein will be shared online. And we do thank all of our colleagues. I believe we had over 70 participants at one time. And we will keep you updated as IGIS and other colleagues move forward in research on this important topic. Thank you very much. And for those of us in Asia, have a nice evening. Back in Europe and South America, have a good day and take good care.